All right, so welcome to today's show. I'm very happy to have Gero Gunkel on the show today, and he's the group head of AI at Zurich Insurance, and it's obviously a very interesting topic to talk about. But before we go there, before we go into the AI conversation, I'd like to go into a bit more of a personal conversation with you, Gero. So first of all, thank you for being here, and let's go a bit into your story. Tell me of maybe one or two or some of the defining moments that shaped your story, that shaped your path, that ended up to where we are today.
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. And to be brutally honest, I don't think I had like this one big defining moment that brought me to where I am today. I think it was more like I was lucky at the beginning that I got very early in my career some very good stretch assignments. So really like high risk, high reward projects that turned out very well. And this somehow created for me a positive feedback loop. First of all, that people trusted me more to give me bigger tasks, but also that I started myself to really actively seek bigger ticket items, really trying to see, okay, what is really something really big that I could do next? And this kind of led from one project to a bigger project to a bigger project. And at some point I was asked if I want to do the first AI prototype for Zurich Insurance in 2015. And that's how I and AI met in a way. And this was a brutally difficult project, but we, and I really have to emphasize here the we, not the I, me, my colleagues, the people in the business together made it work. And that then, I think, accelerated the whole development, both for myself, but also for the company in that area. And also obviously for my own character, for my own personality.
I mean, this is a great one. It's about stretching yourself. At the end of the day, that's kind of like what I got from what you just shared. It's about stretching yourself. And that's kind of like, that was maybe not a defining moment, but a defining maybe theme, a defining thing that got you to grow and grow more as an individual as well, as a person. Now, you mentioned people, you mentioned we instead of just I. So are there some specific people that you remember that you feel really shaped your path, that really shaped your journey?
Probably three type of groups that I should mention. First of all, I've been extremely lucky since I joined Zurich with my line managers, because I always had people who gave me always the benefit of the doubt, always said, look, it's up to you to drive it, full trust in you, though actually the space to develop. Then I think another group that hugely influenced me to try to like achieve more in shorter time, to try to do bigger items, were that a lot of friends of mine from school started to be entrepreneurs, and I kind of saw them, one building a multi-million-dollar startup, the other one becoming a superstar in oil trading, and because we were peers and we were always, to a certain extent, also competing, I think that also gave me the good flame to push myself as well. And last but not least, and most probably often overlooked, it's the upbringing, it's the sister, the parents who kind of like, who shape the way you view the world, who influence you, how you deal with setbacks and frustrations. And as with so many parts in life, you kind of learn more and more that you're very similar to your parents the older you get.
Very, very interesting, especially, I mean, with those different groups, it just shows once again now how important support systems are. I mean, in terms of people, how important it is to have peers around you, how important it is to have mentors around you, how important it is to have people that you can really grow with, to have around you. This is absolutely beautiful. Now, you mentioned your parents at the end as well. Let's maybe take one step back into your childhood. If you look back, was there some sort of a childhood dream that you said, I want to become RoboCop one day, or like, was there something like that, or a firefighter? I don't know. Was there something like that?
So in a way, I must say I failed my childhood dream, because I was a nature boy. I never wanted to work in an office. I never wanted to wear a suit. I never wanted to work in a corporation. My dream was to live in the forest with animals and really like be one wild Boy Scout, something like this. So I I think if my 7 or 8 year old me would see me today, he would be really disappointed. So having said this, I'm really happy and satisfied where I am today. So I think it's a good lesson to say sometimes you can be happy if your dreams don't become reality.
You know, it's so interesting talking about dreams because sometimes, all dreams change, right? Because every person changes along the way. But it's always interesting when we look back because I just talked to somebody and I asked them the same question. They said, I always wanted to become a pilot. Today, I'm not a pilot. I'm, heading a software department, but I'm still a pilot in my free time. So it's very interesting, like how they sometimes still come into your life. Probably this topic of nature is still something that is fairly important too, because it's those are what you've grown up with.
Yes, and I think the other question is, when I say nature, I mean it's also probably about more an underlying theme of freedom, independence. That's what I valued. But as a child, I didn't express it as freedom or independence, but I expressed it as being free, living in nature. But that's probably the underlying theme, and I think that's also what I see today in my work, that I really like to work with other people together, but very independently on topics. That's just something that gives me a very deep and long-lasting satisfaction.
Now let's stay there. Let's stay on the passion. Let's stay on that path. I'm very, very interested in that. Now, maybe let's start with insurance. When I hear insurance, I don't have a lot of passion because insurance for me means I have to pay for something that I may likely never use. And that's pretty much what's in my brain. And when I think about working in insurance, I also don't get very excited. I've talked to a lot of insurance leaders, and when I talk to them, I suddenly get very excited because suddenly they have a whole new picture that they give me. So I'd love to see your picture or hear your picture. Like, why on earth did you join in?
It's such a good question. In fact, let me tell you a little anecdote. When I joined Zurich, or when I got an offer from Zurich, I called my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, really good news! I got this offer from Zurich." And he was like, "So now, my son, you're working in insurance, which means you're even working in a more boring sector that I worked in." And my dad was a teacher working for the government, so I was like, "Thanks, Dad." So I got so I got this feedback even from my own family. But if you look at insurance, what is insurance doing? We are protecting people in a situation when they need it. If a spouse or close person of them dies, if they're in a car accident, if their house is on fire. So generally, I can very much identify that there is a value to people in the world because we have insurance. And now, looking more at my role in terms of data, I think there's no better sector out there than insurance, because some of these cool tech startups, they do a lot of analytics, but in the end, all of the analytics they are doing is to get more advertising, to increase the clicks on your homepage. So that's a very narrow focus. But as an insurer, we insure close to all risks that are out there. We insure your life, we insure you against fire, theft, political risk, financial risks. So just the amount of data types that we look at, IoT data, internet data, financial data, is just so broad. And that means if you're into data analytics, if you're into machine learning, then there's so much to do. There are so diverse data sets, and there's also so many different ways of how you can apply those data sets that I would be so cheeky to say there's no better sector to work in than insurance if you're really into data.
Very interesting view, very interesting inside view as well. And it kind of like drives me a little bit to the topic of impact, because if I try to state what you mentioned there, if I try to understand it in my own words, it's about the impact at the end of the day. Driving more clicks to your website is one type of impact, but then improving people's lives at a very fundamental level is another type of impact. So this is a very interesting thing, which also drives me to this topic of passion, of course, and also this topic of, around your personal mission. I mean, has there been a red thread in your life that you feel that's always the thing that followed you so far? Maybe a slogan, a tagline, a red thread, a personal mission. Is there something like that that you see? Well, there's a pattern maybe.
I think from my work, I've developed a very particular passion in the area of AI, which I think has some broad implications. And let me start with data. So roughly 20% of all data out there are structured data, so numbers. 80% of all data that are out there are unstructured data. Most of that is text, emails, PowerPoints, whatever, contracts. Now, machines, computers are absolutely amazing already to process numbers. So we built all these big financial models because machines can compute all of that in seconds and can tell us something that we were not able to grasp ourselves. And my focus of my work is very much to teach machines to read and understand text. And for me, the ultimate vision where I want to get to is if we have a machine that can read and comprehend text the way we can do, and it can read all the books in the world, all the articles in the world, what could this machine tell us about ourselves or the world we're living in? Because I think we could get some really just different view on us as human beings, and also vastly increase the progress of really humanity if we could finally bring machines to the level that they can process text the way they can process numbers today, getting insights within seconds, processing unlimited amounts of data. And that would be for me the vision from my work, at least, where I would like to get, hopefully sooner than later.
Now, this is a topic I'd like to stay on for a second, because one of the things, if I just put myself into a situation of, okay, I'm listening to that right now, one of the questions that comes up, oh, it's nice, okay, a machine can read all the books in the world and maybe make sense of everything that is there, but is a machine able to put meaning to the understanding of, okay, I'm reading a book and I understand the story in the book, maybe, for example, it's science fiction or something like that. I as a machine, I understand the story, and there's an end, there's a beginning, this thing, that's what the people are doing and everything. But am I able to put meaning to something like that? Meaning saying, oh, well, this is what this means for the real world. For example, maybe it's a too conceptual question, but what I'm also saying is like, a machine can say, okay, a shoe is something that people wear, but do you feel that it's also able to say, okay, the shoe is, like that shape, like this, the shoe could also do that, do this, which, well, logically makes no sense if a shoe is made for people to wear to walk. If that's the definition of something, then it would make no sense to use the shoe for something else. But in a certain situation, it may make sense to fix a problem. If there's a nail and I have my shoe and no hammer, I'm just, putting the nail with my shoe into the wall, as an example. So do you think machines with, just on this topic of data, do you feel that we're going there, or we're kind of like very much stuck in pure data?
So I think, and let me first echo back a bit what you said, just to make sure that I got this right. I think your question was a bit, are we on a good way to get a human level AI, a machine that can reason and think the way we do, and that is not just able to find a statistical pattern in data, but that is also able to, for some certain kind of higher order level reasoning, to suddenly look at something and just say, this makes me sad, or I can just use this for a completely different purpose. So if that was your question, then we are definitely not there yet. And in fact, I think the overall progress in this area has been much slower than a lot of people think, because currently we're just running on faster and faster computers. However, my hope is that with all the investments that we're now seeing in that area, is that we also will develop more alternative approaches about how machines can reason. And the ultimate aim, and there I'm, for instance, very much with people like Gary Marcus or Pascal Kaufmann, is how can we make sure that a machine can learn as quickly and easily as a human child? Because a human child means normally one or two data points to understand something. If you go with a human child to a zoo and you say, hey, that's an elephant, it will kind of understand the concept of an elephant forever. For a convolutional deep neural net, which is currently like the latest of the latest, to just be able to classify the picture of an elephant somehow correctly, it would need 400 to 500 data points. So why is this 3-year-old toddler so much better than a smart machine in brackets? Whoever finds a solution for this one will be a very rich person, and he deserves every single dollar he's making, because it will truly bring us to a completely new level.
Very, very interesting topic. Obviously, Pascal Kaufman is somebody that also we both know, and he's also very much talking on this topic, and not just talking, but also quite involved in very interesting things there. So just brings me back there. So talking about industry more specifically once again, and AI, of course, and the developments. Where do you feel like we are today? If you look at insurance and the model and how everything works, where do you feel we're standing today? And where do you feel we should be in the coming years, or where we should be going?
Sure. And I would actually follow now the theme that I just mentioned with the data, in the sense that today we can crack everything that is, not everything, but we can crack most of the things that are data rich. So if you give me something where there are lots of examples data, the algorithm will find the pattern and will most probably understand the task at hand. So on this side, I think we have made huge progress. Also at Zurich, we had some very successful case studies, teaching machines to read medical reports, teaching machines to read contracts. But these were narrow tasks, complex but narrow, and we had sufficient data. And I think we will now more and more run out of steam on these kind of tasks. And the jump that I'm hoping we're now doing in the next, good question, hopefully 2, 3, 4 years, is that we teach machines to also be able to first grasp complex tasks that are not very data rich, so things that don't happen very often, and more importantly, that we make great progress around what we call transfer learning, so that a machine who is able to read a medical report, who is able to read a contract, somehow uses this knowledge then on a third task to read a newspaper, because it learned through the medical report something, or it learned through the contract something that it finds useful to also understand the newspaper. So I think, transfer learning and learning from few data points are the key obstacles to overcome. And I think until then, we will be, in a way, fenced to only focus on data-rich tasks, and we will not make this jump to kind of every task that we're seeing today around us.
So
does it help, or is it too technical description?
No, it's great. I mean, it goes in the direction of saying, well, there's a certain way we've done it until today, and we're probably going to need a dramatically, different way that we don't know really yet how it will work, but we kind of know how we would like it to be, which is a really good start.
Yeah, I think we're currently burning through our low-hanging fruits still, and these low-hanging fruits are still complicated. I don't want to say low-hanging fruits are easy. So there's still a lot more we can do. There's still lots of benefits we can reap. But what we already see on the horizon is that there are still then certain tasks, certain challenges that we cannot overcome with today's technologies, and where we then hope that the R&D efforts that are happening around the world will help us, but also our own work will help us to push that further and further.
This is a really interesting topic. I could talk about AI and the more philosophical part of it, especially as well behind it, but that would take another 17 hours. So maybe another time over coffee. Now, let's talk about lessons learned. It can be anything from failures to successes in what you've been up to in your career. Building, scaling, innovating, it's up to you. Can you give or share 1 or 2 specific examples, stories that you feel that's really either big success or failure, but you learned a lot from, and what that lesson was?
Sure. I think one lesson that I personally learned is to be very humble about my own learnings, because after you do your first project and successful, you kind of think, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know how to approach these problems. And then you run into your second project and you suddenly have so many new problems, and you apply your methodologies, your approaches from your first work that worked, and you suddenly realize, oh, they don't help. So you become more humble. You also know what you don't know. You realize that certain things, certain patterns that you thought would help you here were actually just random coincidences that you interpreted as the right trigger or signal for something. I think that was a key lesson that I learned. And I think the other one, and that sounds a bit cheesy, but it is so true, is that the overall innovation game only works as a team. Anybody who is trying to achieve something by sitting himself somewhere and thinking about something long time will, in my opinion, fail. It's like really like trying to play football alone. So you really need to have very strong capabilities to convince people to go with you down the path, to have the patience to overcome failure, and to really, really work together on all these problems. Because you will never have the situation where one guy knows everything. You always need a group of people. And this seems to be somehow apparent. So I kind of always knew, okay, it's like 70% team play, 30% a bit like of individual work. But the more I do it, I think it's like 97% teamwork and maybe 3% individual work. So it's probably the biggest and most important team sport you can have in a big company.
Yeah, it's always very interesting to see, like when it comes to the leadership conversation, where we're actually going to go now, to see, why some people have leverage and why others don't. Because the ones who don't have leverage believe that they are the greatest leverage, and the ones who make really big changes, they realize that, in those, I don't know, 79 or whatever you shared percentage, they are not necessarily the leverage, but the people matter the most. The people you work with, the people around you, the stakeholders who buy in or do not buy in, and everybody around you really is the leverage, and not only is the leverage, but creates the leverage and creates the real changes. Very, very interesting there. Going a bit into leadership. You are at a point where organization is growing pretty fast. Based on what you said last time, it's pretty exponential right now, how things are growing and the team size and everything is pretty much exploding. How do you cope with all of that? How do you perform, stay successful on that path, and stay sane at the same time?
How to stay sane? I like that question. So again, I don't think there's like a very easy like 2-3 rules that you need to stick to so everything goes well. I think it's more the general principle, and it doesn't matter if you work with one person, 100 people, or like 1,000 people. I think what worked for me always in any kind of setup is that as long as you are strictest to yourself and you kind of work the longest hours, and people see that you really, really want to achieve it and that you're really willing to do everything to achieve it, then I just have the feeling people naturally will support you and will work with you on it. I think the biggest risk, no matter if you are very senior, very junior, whatever, is that what you say and what you do, that there's a huge discrepancy. Because the moment that happens, people realize it, and then they will also question more what you're saying and question more your plan. I think as long as you really push yourself to the fullest to achieve the targets, and really don't spare yourself also from some boring or mundane work that needs to be done as part of this overall effort, as long as people also see that, and as long as you also share or like actively appreciate everybody's support, then people will go with you. There's a good collaboration. People will work with you. Generally, people like to work on big ticket items. People also like to do broad changes. they just need to really believe into it and need to believe that everybody is putting most into it in it. So it's to motivate others, you probably need to most look at yourself first.
Very interesting, this topic of self-leadership and walking the talk, basically saying, okay, well, that's important what I tell people. It's more important what I show. It's more important what I show for myself. It's more important that I walk the path than what I tell and what I say. It's very, very interesting theme, very interesting topic there. Now,
it's quite funny. I just got an email from a friend who is running the startup, and he was actually just saying what you said. He said, "Look, it's all show, no tell, just show." So he apparently just went through a quite successful exit of his company, and that was his conclusion from 4 years of work. So I think we have found a common pattern here.
Absolutely, I agree. It's very interesting, how these things always come out of conversations. Now, leadership is a buzzword, of course, and everybody understands something else under leadership. I'd like to know what you understand of leadership. So, what is your own personal definition of leadership, or what does leadership mean to you?
So, first of all, I'm not even sure if I would classify myself as a leader or more as an entrepreneur in a big company who's trying to change things, because I still, and maybe I'm old-fashioned, but if people say leader, I immediately think about a guy who runs a huge company with a multi-billion-dollar balance sheet and that he's responsible for. Well, I see myself more in the bucket of people who try out new things and try to, or are willing also to fail on new things and try to take the lead on this. So yeah, a leader in a best case scenario, somebody who is very strongly able to motivate others to follow him, and maybe now in my very own narrow sense, a guy who's also willing, like as the very word says, to take the lead on something that might fail and to take the risk other ones are maybe not willing to take.
It's very interesting, and I'm going to try to repeat in my own words what I heard, and maybe I'm completely going in the wrong direction, and if I do, then stop me, please. But what I heard is more like, well, maybe let's talk less about leaders in that sense. Let's talk more about entrepreneurship, because it's very often, of course, there's a baggage to every word that we have. Machines don't necessarily have that. We have it, and it's very interesting of looking at this as more of a topic of entrepreneurship, because maybe it's preventing us of going into management too much. And it's allowing us to go more into the direction of MVPing and prototyping and trying and failing and testing and see what works, and understanding that 9 times out of 10 we're going to fail anyway. So let's prepare for that. And it's just very, very interesting. That's kind of like what I got a sense for now.
And that very much describes the word I feel most comfortable in, is actually that trying out something over a couple of weeks. If it doesn't fail, drop it, try the next thing. That is like, in this kind of description, in this kind of narrative, I would feel myself personally probably most home.
I love that. This is so brilliant. It's a beautiful description of leadership, actually. It's it's very interesting. Now, let's go into the magic wand area. Let's go into the genie area. So let's imagine you had a magic wand and you could wish for anything in the world. What is something that you would wish for that could multiply the impact that you have at least 10 times?
I think what I have in mind would probably rather multiply it 100 or 1,000 times, not just for me, but for the world as a whole. And it's a bit now of a duplication, but I think if we could really build a machine that can reason and think like us, then I think that would be just absolutely amazing, because we would have an unlimited digital workforce to do tasks we don't like to do research on things that are relevant for humanity. Probably it's beyond the small capacity of our human brains to imagine such a world, but I personally associated with that a very positive outcome for all of us. And just to add this, a lot of people are scared of machines that if they're smart, they will do something bad to us. And that's, honestly speaking, a feeling I don't share at all, because just because something is smarter, more intelligent than us, that doesn't mean it needs to be evil or suppressive. And I think it's such a human thing to associate smartness and cleverness immediately with the idea to be the big boss and to dominate everything. I think that just shows a bit how the human brain is wired.
It's so funny. I mean, thank you for sharing that. It's I love this topic of smarter doesn't mean evil. Just because we humans have a tendency to dominate the world, doesn't mean that a smarter being, whatever that may be, may also have that, sense for dominance, right? But if we as humans, of course, put this idea into it that, well, it has to be, right, because we watched Terminator 7 times.
And also because we are in the end, we are a product of tens of thousands of years of evolution, which had a certain struggle for survival, and that's why I think it's somehow still in us. But it doesn't mean that under the same logic, an algorithm would need to understand, explore, and view the world.
I love this. So thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your wisdom, your lessons, and your view of where things going, your story. Really appreciate it, Gero. I'm going to link to some of the resources below here, to the company page, to your LinkedIn profile, so people can also learn a bit more about what you're up to, what the company's up to, what are some of the cool things that you guys are launching. And of course, also get in touch for opportunities, whatever they may be. So because at the end of the day, it's really about connecting, collaborating, doing things together, like you said as well. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time and being on the show, Gero.